Greetings and welcome, or welcome back as the case may be. Today is Wednesday, so we're talking a little more generic writing. And so today I would like to discuss the idea of a world Bible. Now, a world Bible, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, is simply a place where you've written down the rules of your world, how things work. This is especially important for things like magic or if you're inventing whole societies. I have to admit, I don't tend to need one because most of my stories have been set in the modern world. So I don't need to flesh out the culture and history. I've got the world as we know it. But I do insert a little bit of magic. So I do write down a few details. What can magic do? What can it not do? What are its restrictions? What are its non-restrictions? So all of this type of stuff starts going into a world Bible, and we'll talk more about it. But if you're doing a historical setting or a high fantasy setting, it's definitely a situation of you need to take the time to work on your world Bible, to work out all these little details and put them in a place where you can easily and readily find them. Now, different people have different ways of working a world Bible. Some just write it out in paragraphs and sections, culture, and list out the major cultures and societies and nations underneath that tab so they can come and find it later. Others just like bulleted lists. And still others like a more visual thing, and they create these massive note card webs on their bulletin boards and things like this. So, what's the difference then between that and outlining? Because with the World Bible, you're not so much interested in the story. You're interested in all this background stuff that keeps you from saying, magic can do this in chapter 2, but then your main character has trouble doing exactly that later on in the story with the magic and no explanation of why suddenly they can do this thing that was established in chapter 2. And I can tell you there's little that's more frustrating to a reader than, wait, you said this was possible, this was easy, and now all of a sudden they're having trouble with it with no explanation of why or why not. Now, that said, I'll give you a little leeway as a reader. I will make the assumption that something has changed, that the villain or the world itself has been altered in some way. But if that turns out not to be the case, I am very unhappy with you as a writer. So getting your world Bible set is probably a good idea. And why this came up is because I do have a high fantasy story or two in mind. And I sat down to start putting paper to pen, and the question came up in my head, wait a minute, how does magic work? Why can these things be done and these things can't? And because it's no longer set in the modern world, I need nations and things to fill out my story to make it interesting and feel like it's a real world. So this is what the World Bible is. And by the way, very little of it, just enough to be interesting, should filter in directly into your story. Please avoid big info dumps. I know you've spent a lot of time doing your World Bible, getting everything together, but the last thing you want to do is just spend 3 pages going, blah, here's my wonderful world. We're interested in your wonderful story. The world is just there to keep place and to have rules that confine what you're doing. So with that in mind, I'm going to hush for today. Hope you've enjoyed. If you do, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Have a good day. Bye.